Okay, we'll start with this. Unbeaten up-and-comer of Cuba, David Morrell says, David Benavidez claims to be avoided, but he doesn't mention my name.
Well, why would he?
Undefeated WBA super middleweight champion, secondary champion, David Morrell, is ready to let the world know he wants the best fights possible, and as soon as possible, Morrell Jr. from his training camp in Houston, Texas, with coach Ronnie Shields, says a fight with David Benavidez is what he seeks most. I look at someone like David Benavidez, who claims to be avoided, but you never hear him mention my name, said Morrell Jr., who has knocked out 5 of his last 6 opponents in the pro ranks. He speaks as though he's this boogeyman in the division. Well, fight me, and let's find out. He's chasing a fight with Canelo, but I know I'll give him the beatdown that he'll never forget.
There's some truth to that.
David Benavidez's reputation as a boogeyman of some kind has more to do with a middleweight who seems to be avoiding a fight with him, Jermall Charlo. We talk about that all the time. And a fabricated narrative.
A narrative created by YouTube content creators.
Because Canelo Alvarez chose to fight Dimitri Bivol instead of David Benavidez, that somehow that makes David some sort of a boogeyman in the super middleweight division when...
That's a stretch.
Anyone familiar with Dimitri Bivol at light heavyweight as opposed to super middleweight knows that he's always been a capable boxer and a threat to anyone with a belt at 175 pounds, let alone a naturally smaller fighter moving up in weight.
David being a boogeyman is just the narrative that PBC shows on YouTube created.
Yeah, maybe he is a boogeyman to Jermall Charlo, who for the last 2 years has seemed hesitant to lock horns with David Benavidez. Maybe to Jermall, he's a boogeyman. But as far as being the boogeyman, the boogity man at super middleweight, that title is neither proven nor earned. David Morrell says, I've seen every style you can possibly think of in the amateurs, so I know how to beat a guy like David Benavidez, who comes forward and likes to bang. David Benavidez is a great puncher with a lot of heart, and he's a warrior. I'll give him that. But he doesn't have the skills that I possess. I'll fight David Benavidez anytime, anywhere. But will he fight me? That's the question. The fans want to know, myself included. Now the world knows who I want most. Let's see who the real boogeyman is. Come to Papa, David.
Boo.
We've known for some time that David Morrell Jr. has been pursuing a fight with David Benavidez. David Benavidez, who's going to be in action this weekend against another David at this weight, David Lemieux. And David Lemieux is not as adequately suited for this task as David Morrell Jr. would be. You know, David Benavidez gets by on being a very big super middleweight, a statuesque guy who could easily campaign as a light heavyweight. That's worked for him as a super middleweight. And it just so happens that David Morrell Jr., he's a big guy for the weight as well.
Yeah, it's not that David Benavidez ain't a fun fighter to watch.
He is. He's an action guy, and he looks for the knockout. He looks to punish his opponents. But this reputation he's amassed as some kind of a boogeyman has more to do with a middleweight than a super middleweight.
I think it escapes people that David's no boogeyman.
David Benavidez.
Did you watch Caleb Plant last week?
Yes, I watch it.
And tell us your thoughts on the Caleb Plant performance.
I'll be honest with you, I need to recognize that he proved me wrong. He's a great fighter.
He's a great fighter. Caleb Plant just posted on his social medias that you said that David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant needs to take more time. Why?
Look, this business is for 2 reasons. Make money and more money. I'm pretty sure that Plant, he want more money as well as Benavidez. So now, really, nobody knows much about the 2 greats. David Benavidez, he needs another 2 fights, 2 good fights, and then he can go to be a pay-per-view.
The obvious answer fans would say, well, we want the best fight and the best. We're tired of paying for C versus D. We want A versus A.
Well, you have 2 A's, no doubt.
That's what I mean, 2 A's and David Benavidez and Caleb Plant.
To see 2 A fighters, you need to pay. You cannot be for free.
These excerpts from David Benavidez's own promoter, Samson Lukowicz, are 2 years old, you understand. This is from before he lost the title on the scales, ahead of what was the Romer Angulo fight. This was before all of that. This was before COVID shut the world down.
A few weeks before, yeah.
Caleb was an unbeaten champion, and so was David. And you heard it from the horse's mouth. You heard it from Samson Lukowicz himself. He didn't want to do that fight in a jiffy. He didn't want to do that fight right away. He wanted to wait. Where Caleb Plant was pursuing a fight with David, it was David's end of the spectrum, David's side of things, that delayed that.
If not for David's own promoter, that fight could have happened sooner than later. Caleb wanted it too.
That's why David Benavidez is no boogeyman. Believe you me, he's no boogeyman at 168 pounds. He was already approached for a fight.
David Morrell already approached them for a fight weeks ago, months ago.
He was turned away. Jose Benavidez Sr., the father of David Benavidez. In so many words, he said, hell no.
That's what he said. It's on camera.
It's not my imagination. So when David Morrell says that David Benavidez, he likes to pass himself off as some kind of boogeyman at this weight.
No, not quite.
It's your end of things that delayed the Caleb Plant unification match that, it could have happened behind closed doors the same way that Charlo versus Rosario happened behind closed doors in the thick of the pandemic that same year in 2020. It could have happened if David's end of things wanted it to happen, but it didn't. He ended up blowing the weight, losing his title on the scales, and the rest, as they say, is history.
He's not a boogeyman. There've been guys looking for fights with him.
David Benavidez, he talks real spicy to Jermall Charlo, a middleweight. A conversation that has gained some traction all the while. David Morrell, he's talking spicy about David Benavidez. He says, I'll wreck David Benavidez like Crawford did his brother.
David Benavidez said he's not leaving that division till he gets fights with Caleb Plant, Jermall Charlo.
But you know what Jermall Charlo said? Jermall Charlo very recently said that, he'll fight David next year, 2023.
I want to pay attention to that because David Benavidez is fighting this weekend.
Jermall Charlo returns to action next month on the 18th. There's plenty of time still left this year on a schedule like that to do a fight between Jermall and David, but you hear what Jermall is saying. He's putting a David Benavidez fight in 2023. He's saying that fight don't happen until next year. So what does David Benavidez do for what remains of this year?
You're fighting this weekend. What are you going to do beyond that?
With what remains of this year, you're supposed to fight this weekend against David Lemieux in a fight I have no doubts David Benavidez is going to win. He's going to stop David Lemieux. That's what I think is going to happen. And if he does, and the prediction sticks, what does David Benavidez do with what remains of 2022? Does he take on David Morrell? David Morrell, who said, I saw that Benavidez mentioned my name with Jermall Charlo and Caleb Plant. Well, I'm here to let him know that I'm not afraid of him like these guys are. I'm ready to fight him anytime, anywhere, continued Morrell, who resides and represents the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, Minnesota. If Benavidez dares to step in the ring with me, it will be like when his brother Jose got wrecked by Terrence Crawford. There's going to be another Benavidez on deck, and his name is going to be David, not Jose. I'm putting a target on Benavidez's back. I'm aiming to take him out. Morrell has been fast-tracked since turning pro, and despite only having 6 fights, has already captured a world title.
Wait a minute. So, Team Benavidez is hesitant to fight a guy that only has 6 fights.
6 fights and a secondary title, because we all know who has the full one. Canelo Alvarez. He is this division's full-fledged WBA champion, not David Morrell. And I see a situation to where, you know what?
What?
The whole point of Benavidez versus Lemieux is to crown a mandatory challenger by way of the WBC. I mean, that's the whole point of that fight. The winner of the fight becomes Canelo Alvarez's mandatory challenger. You could have did that months ago with David Morrell. The secondary version of the WBA title he has could also make you the mandatory challenger for one of Canelo Alvarez's belts. But this is the path that was chosen for you. Not David Morrell, David Lemieux.
So isn't it obvious what they're doing, what they've been doing?
Just giving it to you straight. It's the only way I know how to give it to you. And it seems to me that David Benavidez, he's no boogeyman. If he's a boogeyman, he's a boogeyman to Jermall Charlo, a middleweight. But at super middleweight, there have been 1 or 2 guys pursuing fights with him.
They've been pursuing fights with you.
David Morrell has. David Morrell, who says, I came to America to challenge the best fighters in the world, like I did internationally in the amateurs for my countrymen of Cuba, concluded Morrell. When Benavidez and I step in the ring, it will be a monumental showdown, a fight everyone will be clamoring to see. I'm going to knock him out cold and establish myself as a superstar in the sport of boxing. David Morrell is going to be in action on the undercard of Stephen Fulton's title defense against Daniel Roman.
And that's set to go down in a few weeks' time.
So put your thinking caps on, kids. If Benavidez versus Charlo likely doesn't happen until next year, according to Jermall Charlo, if that's not supposed to happen until next year, what does David Benavidez do with the rest of the year? What will David Morrell do? What's the PBC going to do? They're going to do that fight before this year is out?
Or are the fights they're about to have the only fights they'll have this year? Are they even going to get those guys back out there?
It's a legitimate question. And all I'm saying is David Benavidez can't be no boogeyman. Not with Caleb Plant having pursued a fight with him 2 years ago, and not with David Morrell Jr. still pursuing a fight with him here today. He might be a formidable fighter and a fun guy to watch, but boogeyman?
That's what he ain't.
In other news, Eddie Hearn fires back at Leonard Ellerbe. I'm 100 times bigger than you. What are you? Nothing.
We talked about this in a previous video.
Leonard Ellerbe had some very not so nice things to say about Eddie Hearn and his ability to promote specifically in the United States.
I know Devin very well. Tremendous fighter. He grew up in this gym. Excellent fighter. Okay? He signed with a promoter who don't know what the fuck he's doing. Okay? He's fucked off over $1 billion and still hasn't built one fucking star in the United States. Okay? I applaud Bill. Very smart guy. And I applaud Devin. They signed with a guy, they made a bunch of fucking money, and that's what they supposed to do. They supposed to do. But again, it's like, ain't no slight on them, you know, but when you're talking about Tank Davis, I gotta pay you what you weigh. I gotta pay you what you weigh. And you can just read in between the lines with that. Again, it has nothing to do with Devin not being a tremendous fighter. But as far as being a draw, then it's self-explanatory. So you can't make a fight like that. Now, Devin has a tremendous opportunity in front of him. Now when you talk about you bring in all of this and you build on that, and it's like, that's a different ball game. But prior to that, it's like, those are good little fights, but there's not no money. And what are we gonna do, sell out an arena? But Tank's already doing that by himself.
Eddie Hearn responded to these comments from Leonard Ellerbe.
Gave a scathing assessment.
There's a few things that have been said recently, especially yesterday. Your good friend Leonard Ellerbe saying that there was talks about the questions asked about Devin Haney and everything else, and his quote was he signed with a promoter who doesn't know what the F he's doing. He's effed off $1 billion and doesn't have a store in the US.
Okay. Well, if I don't know what I'm doing, why am I 100 times bigger than Leonard Ellerbe? Why are we the biggest global promotional company in the world, bar none? And Leonard Ellerbe is not even relevant on in the boxing industry, to be quite. When you talk about the top promoters in the world, do you mention Leonard Ellerbe? Let's be honest, not in a million years. It then comes out and says, oh, Canelo Alvarez only done 300,000 buys. Double it and add more, and that's how many buys. And then if you want, speak to DAZN and they'll confirm it as well. This guy is hilarious. He is so angry. He has lost his mind. And I'm going to, I think I need to take him out for a nice cup of tea, Leonard Ellerbe, But how can you say this guy doesn't know what he's doing? Look at me. Look at me. We're the biggest in the game. What are you? Nothing. You work for Floyd Mayweather.
There's a lot of things that don't get said in the sport of boxing, and one of them is that Leonard Ellerbe is little more than an employee. He works for someone, you understand. Mayweather Promotions ain't his baby per se. He is but a subordinate.
Graduated from being Floyd's water boy,
being his point man at Mayweather Promotions. And congratulations, but you are still little more than just an employee. Still little more than just a subordinate.
You got a boss, sweetheart.
You talk about Leonard Ellerbe's ability to promote fights and the reasons that he gave for not having made a Gervonta Davis versus Devin Haney fight. And in so many words, what he's trying to say is that Devin made a lot of money at Matchroom. The kind of money that Leonard's not about to give him. In so many words, that's what he's saying. And we've had that conversation. We've talked about this in previous videos, that's what Leonard is trying to communicate.
It is.
Devin was making amounts of money over there at Matchroom that Mayweather Promotions wasn't about to give him.
I mean, they can't afford to give him.
Because they're not a global outfit like Matchroom, and they ain't got the juice like Top Rank.
Mayweather Promotions is but a subsidiary of the PBC.
A collection of smaller outfits with smaller stables, smaller promotions that make up the PBC as a whole. You got Mayweather Promotions and Tom Brown, Samson Lukowicz.
These are all smaller promoters in Matchroom by far.
And Leonard Ellerbe is just one among them, just one of them, who's taking jabs at Eddie Hearn's ability to promote.
I'll put it to you this way. Matchroom can afford to pay Gervonta Davis what he makes, but can Mayweather Promotions afford to pay Devin?
Let me repeat that for you one more time.
Matchroom can afford to pay Gervonta Davis what he makes, but can Mayweather Promotions afford to pay Devin?
Read between the lines, you're so fucking smart.
I applaud Bill. Very smart guy. And I applaud Devin. They signed with a guy, they made a bunch of fucking money, and that's what they supposed to do. They supposed to do. But again, it's like, ain't no slight on them, but when you're talking about Tank Davis, I gotta pay you what you weigh. I gotta pay you what you weigh. And you can just read in between the lines with that.
I'm reading between the lines, Leonard. And what I'm reading in so many words is, You're acknowledging that Devin and Bill, they made a lot of fucking money over there at Matchroom. You're acknowledging that.
You're even applauding them for it.
You're applauding the amount of money they made, their tenure over there at Matchroom. You're just not willing to pay them that yourself, not for a Gervonta Davis fight. We all know why. It's because you can't afford to. Guys, you can afford to pay your Yuriorkis Gamboas and your Isaac Cruzes, your Rolly Romeros, those kinds of guys that don't make no fucking money.
You can't afford Devin Haney.
Trying to find different and creative ways to say that, but that's what you're saying when you acknowledge that he makes very good money over there, made very good money over there, and you're just going to pay him what he weighs, as far as you're concerned. See, Leonard Ellerbe is a guy who's always carrying on about how big a star Gervonta Davis is, how he's the cash cow anywhere at or around those weights. But how big a cash cow can he be when he can't afford to pay Devin Haney?
Look at what Caleb Plant got for fighting Canelo Alvarez. That's what you get paid fighting a cash cow.
That's an actual cash cow, and that's what happens when an actual cash cow, a real one, a bona fide superstar in the sport, is involved. Gervonta Davis is none of those things. Not when you gotta go counting pennies and clipping coupons for opponents.
You can't afford Devin Haney. That's what you're saying.
Devin Haney's a champion, and he's been making good money. He's not going to fight on the cheap, though. At the same time, you can't afford to pay him what he's been getting paid. So here we are with a Rolly Romero fight. And I want you to pay attention to what Eddie Hearn said. He said, now, I'm not saying we're going to approach Gervonta Davis, but let me tell you, if Gervonta Davis's contract is up, and only then would we speak to him, what we were saying about those $1 billion, we've got to open up the case, baby, because I would definitely overpay to side Gervonta Davis just for the banter with Leonard Ellerbe. And that goes back to what I just told you. It goes back to what I told you before. Matchroom, a global outfit, they can afford to pay Gervonta Davis.
Yeah, they can pay him, but Mayweather Promotions, they can't pay Devin. Can't afford him.